on, everybody? Welcome back to the Going the Distance podcast presented by ImmaculateSports.com. Twitter's at ImmaCSports.
Instagram is also at ImmaCSports.
TikTok, YouTube, Immaculate Sports. It's episode 218, week 11 of the college football season in the books, week 10 of the NFL season in the books, and we got a lot to talk about. The NBA season is a couple weeks in. We finally have some opinions. We'll be talking about that. And, of course, baseball. There were a couple things we need to put the lid on before we move on to the off season.
Yeah, we've talked about October being a really good sports month. I still believe that November is a pretty good sports month as well, too, because we do have the MLB free agency and stuff kicking off in the off season there, with the NFL games meaning more. College football games definitely meaning a lot right now. And I guess the NBA games mean quite a bit as well, too, with the NBA Cup starting today. And their improved, I'd say, impression around it. I thought everybody, when they first introduced the NBA Cup tournament, was pretty like, okay, this is stupid. But now I think it's catching on a little bit, which is obviously what the NBA wants. But going back to what I did want to talk about with my opener, as we'll get into that, it's going to be Brent Rooker winning the ALDH Silver Slugger Award that was just announced today. It's the A's first Silver Slugger since 2002, so 22 years, which is kind of crazy to think about that it's been that long with how many,
Miguel Tejada didn't win it in 04?
Exactly. We've had MVPs. We've had, top-tier players. Definitely had Gold Gloves, but he's the first since Eric Chavez won it in 2002 to win the Silver Slugger Award for the A's. He's the first DH ever in the A's organization to win it, and it's very deservingly so. I'm super happy to see that he was the guy named for the award over Yordan Alvarez and a couple other guys as well, too. It's a guy who was snubbed in an all-star appearance, definitely should have made it, didn't get it, and I mean, he's proved everybody wrong, and I'm happy that he's an A. Dave Forrest has said that we're not trading him this offseason as well, too, which is a sound that we're not too familiar with as A's fans, so it's good to see a star player like him hopefully sticking around for a long time.
Yeah, very well deserved. We know too well about how these things turn out for a small market team. They usually don't get the love, so it's great to see him getting recognized finally because he became a star out of thin air. But my opener is going to be something we all saw two nights ago, Sunday Night Football. The Lions won 26-23 in Houston. And the way this episode is, we're not really going to get to talk about this one. So this is the shot right here. Jared Goff, he threw 5 picks and they still won. NBC showed their halftime interview with Dan Campbell talking about taking the ball away from Stroud. And it happens the very next play. They're basically the Kansas City of the NFC right now. It's hilarious. Jahmyr Gibbs stepped up big time, and the defense in the second half was incredible.
Yeah, definitely a crazy game. I was busy watching The Penguin when that game was going on because the episode came out right at 6, and so I barely watched any of the first part of the game. I finished the episode, go back on to the game or the channel where the game was on, and they go, Jared Goff started his 5th pick. And I was like, what in the world? And I mean, this is a guy who's usually has like 2 or 3 incompletions a game. To have 5 interceptions was pretty crazy to see. And they still won that game, which is even more crazy there. But before we get into our defensive player and rookie of the week in the NFL, I'm going to just go over some of the moves that we saw within the MLB this past week and kind of my slight reaction to them. Obviously, nothing too crazy yet. But we are starting to get the first baby steps of the MLB offseason getting started. Starting on November 6th, we saw Kyle Hendricks, longtime pitcher for the Cubs, agree to a 1-year deal with the Angels. Don't really know about that, but that's not my opinion there. Austin Hedges returned to Cleveland on a 1-year deal. On the 7th, we saw TJ McFarland, who was decent in the A's bullpen last year, return back to the A's on a 1-year deal.
Always need a lefty.
The 8th. Yeah. On the 8th, we saw a whole bunch of, minor league contracts, nothing crazy there. On the 11th, a.k.a. yesterday, we did see a small trade that included the A's when they traded Nick Allen, shortstop, to the Atlanta Braves for right-handed pitcher Jared Johnson. Johnson, who I was kind of looking at yesterday for the A's fans that are listening out there.
Yeah.
He's a guy 94 to 97, can reach up to 99, but his slider, I guess, is really hard. Like gets up to 92, 93 sometimes. It was a weird article that I was reading, but Fangraph said that he's got a pretty interesting two pitch delivery. He's a big dude, has ability to be a middle of the bullpen type guy. And then today we did have a couple small moves as well too. We saw Travis DiArno agree to a 2-year deal with the Angels, so he's going to be the backup presumably for Logan O'Hoppe, which will be a pretty good catching duo there. And then Guillermo Zuniga, who has pitched in the World Baseball Classic for Venezuela. He was very good there. Got designated for assignment by the Angels, so maybe a guy, minor league contract somewhere that could end up being an impact reliever for a team if everything works out well and they learn how to hone him in some way or another. But that's all the moves we've got so far. Obviously, nothing crazy. We know Juan Soto, I believe, is meeting with the Blue Jays tomorrow, and then the Red Sox the day after that, and meeting with a whole bunch of teams. We know how his sweepstakes is going to go, though. He's likely going to the team that gives him the most money. So nothing new on that front. We'll talk more about that, and especially Juan Soto a little bit when we get into the team grades. But we're going into our defensive player, and rookie of the week now. Together, who's the player of the week?
I'm going with Jamar Chase of the Bengals. Yeah, they lost on Thursday night in Baltimore, but Chase did everything he possibly could to give these guys a shot. 11 catches, 264 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Lamar gets an honorable mention for me because he played a perfect game, 4 touchdowns, no picks, and won that game against Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. But it's the way Chase is a home run hitter on every single target this year. Not many guys have done that. We've been talking about this when it comes to fantasy football, too. The scoring's been lower. Not for this guy.
Yeah. It's got to be Jamar Chase for player of the week. That Thursday night game was a great one. And seeing Jamar Chase, and especially how he caught 3 different touchdowns, with one being a really long rack catch, one being where he was just, ran a 9 route pretty much, and Burrow hit him deep downfield, and another one being a contested catch in the end zone. Just kind of shows his bag as a receiver and how he's not just a singular, faceted guy. He's got the ability to do all these different things, and he does them at the top of the league in pretty much every single thing. Maybe jump ball's not as good, but he's still ridiculous when it comes to being after the catch, and his speed and all this stuff is remarkable. He's one of the top receivers in the league. So player of the week for me as well. On to the defensive player side.
I'm going to go with Taron Johnson, the slot corner of the Bills, because I'm not sure if Buffalo gets this win over the Colts without Taron Johnson's pick 6 and big sack of Joe Flacco in this one.
I decided to go with Carlton Davis, defensive back for the Detroit Lions. He spent a whole bunch of years in Tampa Bay, comes over to Detroit, and he's been just as good as he's been there. 2 interceptions on Sunday night, 4 tackles as well, too, in a big victory for the Lions that we've already talked about quite a bit already.
He took a big hit from Mixon, too, and stayed in the game.
Yeah. What about rookie of the week?
This was a weird one for me. There's a couple of honorable mentions out there for sure. Bo Nix played pretty well considering the circumstances in Kansas City. Your guy Jared Verse was pretty unstoppable last night. But I'm going to end up going with Slick Ricky Pearsall, 4 for 73 and a big first quarter touchdown and a 3-point win. He's had to step up big time in the absence of Brandon Ayuk. And I feel like all the other rookies with big numbers, like a Tyrone Tracy, also had the game-losing fumble. So I feel like Slick Rick had a really high win percentage, if you will, added on that touchdown catch.
Yeah, I do feel like that Tracy fumble, though, isn't making too many Giants fans upset, considering it bumped them down in the picks, so they have a better pick with that. But my rookie of the week, there's a ton of different guys you could have gone with here. I decided to go with Bo Nix, and that's because he was a blocked field goal away from beating Kansas City in Kansas City the first time he's ever played them in his career. And that would have been a ridiculous thing to do for a rookie quarterback. And I've been anti-Bo Nix for a while now at this point. He's the Denver Broncos quarterback. As a Raider fan, I don't like him. I didn't want us to take him last year. But he was really good against the Chiefs, and I have to give him that. That's one of the best defenses in the league. He went 22 for 30, 215 yards, and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. We know that his supporting cast isn't the greatest. His running backs, Javonte Williams and Audric Estime. Obviously nothing too crazy. His wide receivers, his main guy is Cortland Sutton, but besides that, I mean, are they even like wide receiver 5s on like the Niners or something like that? Like, it's not a good supporting cast that he had, and he played turnover-free football. played a really good game, got his team in position to win the game in Kansas City if it wasn't for obviously the Leo Chanel block field goal that we've seen, a ton of times now at this point. But just a remarkable job by the rookie, and to get his team with that team in the spot to beat the undefeated Chiefs, it was pretty crazy to see.
Brutal.
We do have our last installment of team grades and top of the wish list items for the MLB teams that we haven't talked about yet, which is just 4 of them. The teams over in the ALCS and NLCS. So we have the Dodgers, Yankees, Mets, and the Cleveland Guardians. I guess we'll start it off with an easy one for the team grade. We'll start off with the Dodgers.
Yeah, they're going to get an A+ because they got the job done. They won the World Series, and they didn't even really need Shohei Ohtani, even though he fought through that shoulder injury. I think right now Juan Soto is probably at the top of the wish list, but at the end of the day, I'm sure they'll be happy with Roki Sasaki and a couple of younger bats in the lineup. It's probably a more realistic ask.
Yeah, it's an A+, of course. You win the World Series. I don't think you can get anything but the A+. Regular season, 98-64. Not one of the better records that we've seen from the Dodgers, but they still won the division. This team is just perfectly built for the playoffs. It's something that we learned as well, too, with their lineup. And they really just need one of the 3 guys at the top, Shohei, Freddie, or Mookie, to get hot, and they're going to be fine in that playoff series because you're going to have to work around them. Other 2 guys as well, too, regardless. Their 4 through 9, I think, has improved as the season went on as well, too. That was a big reason on why they did win the World Series. So my top of the wish list item, obviously, Juan Soto would be nice. That's the shiny, star that you would get. But I'm going to say a 1 through 5 dominant rotation. And we're obviously going to see Shohei come back and pitch next year. We're going to see Yamamoto. We're going to see Glasnow, hopefully, and some other guys in there as well, too. But if they finish out that 1 through 5 rotation to just shore up their regular season team, I think would be important because it was kind of close this last year with the Padres getting into that division. Obviously, they still won by, I think, 5 games it was, but they didn't win it until that last week and until they had a big series over the Padres to really clinch the division. And that's not something that we've seen the Dodgers have a ton of struggle with over the last 10 years. And we know the Padres aren't going away either, so I think the Dodgers just have to shore up that they get the NL West title every single year. And by doing that, I think you have to get a 1 through 5 dominant rotation. On to the Yankees.
I'm going to give the Yankees an A-. I usually think of postseason success as bonus points, not as a must get to be remembered like you would an NFL team. But this is the Yankees. They don't really fall in that category. So I knocked them down from the A. They made it to the World Series, but they came up short. I think what they really want to do is try to retain everybody and run it back. Maybe one more premium player. So I'll say someone to take Rizzo's spot if I had to choose one position. But it's a pretty good foundation right now.
Yeah, I do give the Yankees an A grade. The regular season record, only 94-68, I don't think was anything crazy. But I do think that the team overachieved in getting to the World Series. I did not think that they were going to beat the Dodgers. But the top of the wish list item, I mean, how can it not be Juan Soto? I think if you take him out of the equation, you practically just get the 2023 Yankees, and that was a 500 team, one of the worst Yankee teams that we've seen in our lifetime. And with Juan Soto, the vibe around the team just changed, at least for the majority of the year, where they weren't just the 2023 Yankees that were kind of just a joke. They were something to reckon with. It's one of the reasons why they made it to the World Series. And if they don't get Juan Soto back, I think it's just a big hit to the, man, can we actually do this type feel. So it's got to be Soto. What about the Mets?
The Mets get an A grade. What a great run. It didn't really feel like they had a chance against the Dodgers, but they gave everyone else a run for their money all season long. It feels like a new window's opened up for these guys with some former top prospects finally coming up and contributing in the playoffs too. So I think getting a brand new shiny rotation is probably at the top of their wish list too. A lot of issues and a lot of expiring contracts in that rotation.
Yeah. I give an A+ to the Mets, the 89-73 Mets. This team had the making of a World Series winner. I just think they fell short in terms of starting pitching. And I know they got some, favorable outings from Luis Severino, Quintana, Manaya, and some other guys as well too. But we outlined this pretty much the entire regular season when we were doing our power rankings that the starting pitching was just kind of the thing that we were iffy on. The lineup, 1 through 9 is pretty devastating, especially with the ability that they have to just go get free agents pretty much whenever. And again, just like the Yankees and the Dodgers, it would be perfectly make sense to just put Soto at the top of their wish list because that would help solve a lot of problems. But I did go starting pitching as their top of the wish list thing. Minaya and Severino are both free agents, and they're likely going to need 3 guys, whether or not those 2 guys return or not, to help fill out that rotation because it was their weakness this year in getting into that 5th or 6th inning with some of their other guys. Last one, it's Cleveland.
Cleveland gets an A+ for me because they were basically counted out from the jump with the Shane Bieber injury. And they played really well in the ALCS too. All those games were really close. The unfortunate part about this is they're not going to be able to re-sign a lot of their pending free agents. They won't be going after the top guys. But what you can do is keep trading for rentals. As long as J Ram is there, as long as the bullpen is elite, you can't be afraid to wheel and deal. They're going to need some new starters, obviously, but I think the key for postseason success is another discounted bat like a Lane Thomas, like they already did last offseason.
No. It's an A for the Cleveland Guardians for me. I think you look at this group of 4 teams and you see the 3 of the biggest spenders in the league, and you see the Cleveland Guardians right there in it with them. And I know the series was 3-1 in the ALCS, or 4-1 in the ALCS, but it felt like the Guardians were in all those games. And I think just a couple swings away, a couple missed bats away from Emmanuel Clase, and maybe the Guardians take them to 7, or maybe they even win the series. Who knows? But regardless, it was a good regular season. 2023 was disappointing. We expected this team to bounce back, and they did. 92-69. It's tough to say what's next for this team, though. Like you said, I think there's a few different options that you can have. You can run it back and likely come up short again. You can add with money that you don't have and worry about the repercussion. Oh my gosh, I say that word. Repercussions of that later. Or you blow it up. I don't think they blow it up. They obviously aren't going to add, any marquee free agents. So run it back, I think, and, maybe tweak a few different spots. I think one thing that they can tweak is finding a better way to manage the first 5 innings of a ball game. Stephen Vogt's one of the best managers in the league, but it's so tough to make the right move every single time when you use as many high leverage pitchers as they do. You're just bound to make a mistake at some point, and that's not even Stephen Vogt's fault or even the pitcher's fault. It's just the law of averages at that point. You're not going to make the right move every single time, and I think we saw that hurt them, especially later in the playoffs and some of the games that they blew for a bullpen that's ridiculously good. So I think they just need to nail down the first 5 or 6 innings in a better capacity than what they did this past year. And if they had their guys, the 6 relievers that they use in crunch time in the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and just kind of mismatch through, a couple batters rather than an entire inning, I think they'll be a lot better off. So
go call Seattle.
Yeah, still a good, really good season for the Guardians. Making it to the ALCS, of course. Something else we got now, the NBA contender tier list. We've done a bunch of NFL tier lists over the past 4 or 5 weeks. Now we're going to do an NBA one. We've got all the teams. I have just 6 tiers. How many tiers do you have?
Yeah, 6 tiers. I just renamed them.
Perfect.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I did as well too. So we can get it started with the bottom tier. Tell me what you titled it and the teams that you have in it.
Yeah, this is the fail for flag group. These are teams we know they're not going to be in the hunt. It's all about Cooper Flag. And it may be disrespectful to the rest of the draft class because this is going to be an excellent group of college players coming in compared to the past couple of years. So we'll start off with the Utah Jazz. They've been looking to trade their best player Markkanen for a couple of years now, and we may actually get to that point. We already saw Taylor Hendricks, one of their top lottery picks, snap his leg. Disgusting. They're 2-7. It's not going to happen. Similar with the Toronto Raptors. Of course, Scotty Barnes is an excellent player. He just keeps getting better every season, but they're still 2-9. It's just not going to happen this year. Maybe they look to build around him more than blow it up, but they're going to be in the Cooper Flag hunt. Next up is the Portland Trailblazers. We knew this was going to be an issue. They've been rebuilding ever since Dame left, and they don't have that superstar yet. It's not Scoot yet, at least. The Detroit Pistons, maybe a little better than we thought they were. They're 4-7, the 10 seed in the East right now. But I still think it's not enough experience to survive a whole season. We'll see what happens with JB Bickerstaff over there, though. The Chicago Bulls, we knew this was happening. They're another team that's openly shopping a guy like Zach LaVine, their top scorer, and trading for a young point guard, Josh Giddey. And then there's the Washington Wizards. So many problems over there. Also 2-7. I like Jordan Poole, though. That's the positive.
Yeah. Similar to what you had for the title, my bottom tier is the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. I have 4 teams in this. First of which is the Utah Jazz. You talked about Markkanen really being their only marquee guy. Obviously, have some other players in Keontae George, Walker Kessler, who are some solid guys, but you're not going to compete for anything with those. So I think you definitely need to. It'd help you more than hurt you to go for the number 1 pick this year. The Washington Wizards are the next team. There's not a lot there. Like you said, you like Poole, but that's pretty much it. Bub Carrington, Bilal
like him
Coulibaly, some other solid guys as well too, or at least young guys, that is. But there just isn't, a push for the playoffs with that team. I think it's pretty clear to see that they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. Next one is Portland. Scoot Henderson not being who we expected is going to hurt them, and it's one of the reasons why they're still bad in year 3 for him now at this point, or is it year 2?
I think it's year 2.
Yeah, year 2 for him, but they're not coming close to anything this year. They're not even starting Scoot Henderson, so that's not good to see from a guy that was drafted so high. And the last team I have in here is the Brooklyn Nets. We talked about this team potentially being the worst team in the league. They're 5-6 right now, so they haven't shown that. But I think it's not going to help them this year to be good. They have a lot of solid, savvy veterans, which I think is making them a 5-6 team right now. But I don't see them, really competing for a playoff spot once we're through 82 games. So I say they join the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. Into the next tier.
Yeah, these are teams that are not having an ideal start at all right now. We'll kick it off with the 2 former juggernauts of the Eastern Conference, the Bucks and the Sixers. Milwaukee at 2-8, Philly at 2-7. It's a lot of injuries. It's your best players not playing every night. It's a questionable coaching staff. Milwaukee, we've seen Giannis come back and they still can't win. Philly, we see now it's the opposite. Now Maxey is out. This is not good. The rumors are that the coaches and the GMs aren't going anywhere since they're both brand new, but this is not what you want to see. Also over here, we have the San Antonio Spurs. Wembanyama is shooting a lot of threes. It's a little weird, but hey, we kind of figured it'd be a developmental year. They're probably not going to the playoffs. Atlanta Hawks, again, it's hard to be this tough on a team that was just picking number 1, but if you can't figure it out, Trae Young is out of there. And New Orleans Pelicans, man, a team I picked to make the playoffs, not just the play-in. And a couple guards get hurt. Now we see Alvarado, very important player, is also going to be hurt for a significant amount of time. And Zion can't do it by himself.
Yeah. Next tier for me is going to be the no direction tier. I have 4 teams in this list, potentially a 5th. I'm still kind of debating on if I want to put them there. The first of which is the Chicago Bulls. They have Levine, they have Vucevic, they have some guys like Kobe White that are good, but I don't know. They don't feel like they're going to compete for a playoff spot, but they also don't feel like they're going to be trying to be one of the worst teams in the league, and I think that really hurts you when you just strive to be mid. So they're in here. Next one is the Atlanta Hawks. Trae Young, first overall pick they just had. They got some good pieces, but again, they're just going to be mid at best. Toronto Raptors off to a really bad start, but I do like some pieces on their roster. I like Barnes. I like RJ Barrett. I like Emmanuel Quickly. I like Grady Dick. Yeah, exactly. He's been good. But again, there just isn't that direction of, okay, we're in a rebuild right now. And I think that's something that's hurting that team again still. And the last team I have is the Hornets. It's kind of weird because I do think you could just put them in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes super easily. But they don't just, I don't know. They've been in that, we're terrible tier for so long that it feels like they're trying to do something more, and it's just not going to work with it regardless. So they're the last team in the no direction tier, and I'll talk about the fifth team in a minute.
Yeah.
What's your next tier?
The next tier is going to be the biggest for me. Right in the middle, it's the teams looking at the play-in. And I'll start from the back from this one because you just mentioned some of these teams. I have Brooklyn and Charlotte a tier above you. It's not that Brooklyn has any superstar players. I kind of like the direction they're going, defense first. And with Charlotte, it's kind of the complete opposite. I like that Brandon Miller is taking the shots he is. I think he's a future 30 a game scorer. And, well, right now I got to put them above Philly and Milwaukee because they've been unwatchable. Also in this tier, we have some Western Conference teams all lumped together. The Memphis Grizzlies, Houston Rockets, LA Lakers, Sacramento Kings. I feel like they're all going to be in the play-in territory. We're just kind of waiting for which team is going to rise above, separate themselves. Also in this tier, the LA Clippers, not as good without Kawhi, obviously. The Miami Heat, who knows, man? Spoelstra and Pat Riley are still there, so they'll probably be in the hunt all season long, but they don't score a whole lot of points anymore. And the Orlando Magic are missing their best player for a while, Paulo.
Yeah. I have three teams in this next tier that I have, and I just titled it Young. Not young and good, not young and bad, because there's a mix of stuff within here. The first of which is the Detroit Pistons. Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham is a duo I really, really like. They got some pieces around them that I think are decent as well too. And like you said, with them, 4-7 start is better than what we've even talked about in season with them so far. They're just not going to do anything this year, and we know that. I know the East is like super bad right now. I think there's only 2 teams over 500, so they're going to stick around maybe in the race, but I don't think they make the play-in. The next team I have in here is the Spurs. Obviously, their point guard's not too young and Chris Paul, but everything revolves around Wemby in this scenario, of course. And that's exactly what I think that they're doing. I think they're also realizing right now that it's going to take a little bit to even learn how to really use Wemby because he is so unique when it comes to a basketball player. 5 and 6 right now, I don't think is a bad thing in the Western Conference. It would give you the 4th seed in the East right now. So that kind of tells you where you're at. And they're the 12 seed right now in the West. But I don't think they're going to do anything this year. And that's pretty evident. Last team I have in here, maybe is a bit of a surprise, is the Houston Rockets. They've been good so far. 7-4. I like their coaching staff. I like some of the leaders that they have on their team. I just don't think they're good enough to compete in the Western Conference yet. If they're in the East, they probably pull a 6 seed or a 5 seed. But I think they're going to drown in the Western Conference, especially in the second half of the season, because there is so many good teams and there's so many battle-tested teams within it too that it's not just good teams that haven't been here before. And they're the only team that hasn't been here before in comparison to these other squads in the West. So I'm leaving them out of the contender side. On to the third tier.
Yeah,
I guess the fourth tier from the bottom.
Fourth from the bottom. The B tier, technically, I'm going to have my playoff teams. Here are 4 teams, 2 from each conference that, despite a slow start, I think are going to be perfectly fine. From the Eastern Conference, we have the Knicks and the Pacers. Some new faces on the Knicks. They're still figuring things out. Indiana, obviously a crazy run last season, so I trust them. On the Western side, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves. Again, a couple new faces. Anthony Edwards is bound to heat up. And the Dallas Mavericks. Right now, Dallas is only 5-5 outside of the top 10 in the West, but they have 2 of the best scorers in the world.
Yeah, my B tier is my biggest tier that I have. I have 9 teams in here. I titled it Should At Least Play in a Playoff Series, so I guess you can title that playoff teams, and I guess that's not the best wording for it. First team I have in here is the Memphis Grizzlies. I think we're seeing this team and their depths with mainly these like non-known players. I know a lot of like true basketball fans know them, but I think a lot of the casual fans, for the guys that they're playing in the rotations, people are like, okay, never heard of that guy before, but it's working out well. They're scoring 121 points per game right now, one of the best clips in the league, and they're playing some decent defense as well too. Next up is the Pacers. I think this is a slower start than we've expected with them, especially with Tyrese Halliburton. but they're still the 3 seed in the East, and they're only 500, so they're going to be just fine. Next up is the Clippers. Obviously, not having Kawhi isn't ideal, but it looks like they're going to manage through at least to be, a play-in team, and I would be decently confident that Kawhi is back by the plan in order to play in those games, and I think they'll be fine then. Next up is the Miami Heat. Obviously, a team that's kind of been around in the Eastern Conference, and they haven't really changed much over the span of the last 3 or 4 years, maybe even 5 years now at this point. But they're still in the thick of it in the East, and that's a good thing to see for them. Next up is the Orlando Magic. Paulo getting hurt absolutely sucks. We've talked about that before and how we both expected him to, kind of take a big jump this season, and he showed that in the first, 5-10 games that he played. They're 5-6 right now. They're still, above water, even without Paulo, but hopefully they're still there when he gets back because they're obviously going to be a better team. Next up I have is the Sixers. Terrible start, 2-7, but Embiid is back tonight. They're playing close with the Knicks right now in the first game of the NBA Cup, and I think they'll be, just fine once we get through all 82. Next up is the Bucks, kind of same thing as the Sixers, except for they haven't been hurt. I know Middleton hasn't played, but Lillard and Giannis are still there. 2-8 is unacceptable. I think they'll be fine in the long grand scheme of things, or else Doc Rivers gets fired within the next 15 days. Sacramento Kings, second to last team I have in here. I like what they did in the offseason, added DeMar DeRozan. I think it helped them get some shots off of De'Aaron Fox and some of the pressure there. I wouldn't say it's worked terribly great so far, but I also wouldn't say it's gone wrong. 6-5. If you average that out over the entire season of 5.45, 1%, I think that will probably be what it will tell throughout the entire season. And that'll be good enough for a playoff spot. And the last team I have in here, which was the team I was debating and putting in no direction, is the New Orleans Pelicans. Obviously, like you said, the injury bug with them has been brutal. And they're 3-8. They're not in a good spot right now. With the West, a 3-8 period might cost you your season because it's going to be really tough to make up those games. And I think that could definitely be true with the injuries that they've sustained. But you look at the roster, they look like a playoff team still. Might not happen, but I definitely think they're good enough as a playoff team. A tier.
All right. We're going to the teams that are off to a great start. And we'll kick this one off with the undefeated Cleveland Cavaliers, 12-0. It looked like they figured out the formula to win regular season games in the Eastern Conference. The reason they're not at the top is because, well, I think the Warriors are the only team over 500 that they've played in the past 2 weeks. So we'll just have to keep waiting and see what happens there. The OKC Thunder, again, they're getting knocked down because they are going to be without Chet Holmgren, fractured hip, nasty injury against the Warriors. And it's a massive blow. J-Dub, Jalen Williams, has been playing center at 6'5". But the positive is, if you remember, the Warriors had to do something like this when Andrew Bogut broke his foot. And it actually helped because other teams have to take their centers off the court. So we'll keep an eye on OKC for sure. They're definitely still in the race for the top 5. The Phoenix Suns, right now they're number 2 in the Western Conference at 8-2. Great start. Kevin Durant is back. He's been taking all the big shots, and they got weapons all over the place. Bench is a little better even. And the Golden State Warriors, it's a similar story. They're also 8-2. The bench has gotten a lot deeper. Steph Curry is back healthy now. We saw him score 36 points the other night and beat OKC. So awesome for them. It's all about the team defense with them.
Yeah, my A tier is titled Threat to the Throne. Throne obviously being the top tier contenders. And I kind of have 2 groupings within this tier. The first 5 teams that I'll talk about, we'll start off with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Legitimate contender. Like we talked about, I think is going to take a little bit of time for them to figure it out with Julius Randle. 6-4 is good. But right now that's the 8th seed in the West. So I guess they'll have to be a little bit better. Next team is the Dallas Mavericks. Again, a team that's kind of dealt with some smaller injuries to start off so far. Luka's had some tiny little injuries that he's had to go through, but a couple of them in the first 10 games isn't so good. They're 5-5, the 11th seed in the West, which is kind of crazy. but they'll be fine. They're one of the best teams in the league. We know that. The Lakers, anytime you got LeBron and AD, you're going to be, a team that other teams are going to have to worry about. So I think they're definitely within a tier of contenders. Denver Nuggets are the next team I'll talk about. I'm still pretty high on this team. Winners of 5 in a row, 7-3 right now. The offense is really good. Just the defense, it's not that good. And maybe that comes back to haunt them, but we all know that the Nuggets are a good squad. New York Knicks, the next team I'll talk about, 4-5, maybe not the start that they've expected, but they, again, have had a ton of moving parts in the offseason. Maybe it's just taking a little bit longer right now. And they have the ability for it to take a long time because they are in the East. And then in the top tier of this tier, I have 3 teams. I'll start it off with the Suns. Suns are better than I think the 5 teams I just listed. Their star power is obviously evident, and I think their defense plays pretty good as well too. In a lineup that's usually not super defensively oriented. The Cleveland Cavaliers, when you're undefeated through 12 games, you got to be talked about. They're scoring the most points in the league. Their defense is good as well too, and they have 2 legitimate stars in Garland and Mitchell, but they have, star type players as well with Allen and Mobley with them as well too. And that makes it a really tough starting 5 to beat, especially with the depth and the random scoring bursts that they've gotten this year. And the last team I wanted to put them in the for sure contenders, but I held back just because I might be a little bit biased. It's the Dubs. But when you look at how the offense has played so far, especially with Buddy Hield and all these parts that have seemed so perfectly put together by Mike Dunleavy in the offseason, it's tough to say that this Warriors team isn't one of the best teams in the West. And their defense has shown it as well, too. They've only allowed 109 points per game, which I believe is second or third in the West, maybe fourth. But the defense is good and the offense is even better. And that's something that we've seen a ton with the Warriors over their dynasty. And I mean, obviously not to that extent that it was in previous years, but I think this Warriors team is a very legitimate threat in the championship contender tier. Now up to the top tier, thus.
Yeah, these are the finals favorites, and I have 2 teams up here. I'll start off with Denver. That's the one team that's out here, the odd man out compared to your squad. But like you said, man, they are starting to really heat up right now. 5 in a row. They've been scoring crazily. Excuse me. I'm getting excited talking about them. But the thing about Denver is that we know the main guys are going to get theirs. Jokic, Murray, Porter, we know what they're capable of. It's the other guys the past 2 weeks that have stepped up. Peyton Watson, Russell Westbrook has looked so much better. Julian Strawther, backup point guard. These guys are starting to play a lot more minutes, and it's really scary when you have a deep bench. We'll leave it at that. And then, of course, the Boston Celtics, right? They've been shooting the crap out of the 3-ball this season. They're 9-2. One real bad game was against the Warriors, but we'll give them that. It's early in the season. It's kind of a rivalry at this point, if you can call it that, because of the finals matchup. And they're going to be scary all season long. They have so many all-stars on that team.
Yeah. My top 2 teams that I have, I'll start off with the one I have in the West because I definitely still think there's a gap between 1 and 2. And I have the Thunder here. I know Chet just got hurt, but I think they'll still swim without him for 9 weeks or however long he's out. Once he's back, this team hopefully will be healthy. And it's going to be a tough team to beat. The scoring that they have in just so many different ways, but as well as the one specific shot maker that they have in Shai Gilgeous, I think is as good as any big-time shot maker in the league. And when you have that going down the stretch of the game, we know how potent and important that can be in winning you a playoff series or even the NBA Finals. So the Thunder, I think, are the top team in the West still, especially when Chet gets healthy. And the team in the East, like you said, it's got to be the Celtics. I know the Cavs are 12-0, but the Celtics team is just so much better than what the Cavs are. And that's really not trying to belittle the Cavs either. They've been really, really good. But the Celtics team is like, if you looked at the perfect roster and the perfect chemistry that you can have for the modern NBA, limits and capacities that you have within money and the luxury tax and all those, whatever they call them, the third hood or whatever, something like that, for the salary cap. the Celtics roster is perfect, man. They got a bunch of different guys that play super well together, that aren't super high contract guys, but when they play together, they all kind of go to all-star level players. You look at Derek White, you look at Drew Holiday, you look at Kristaps Porzingis, you look at Al Horford, you look at Peyton Pritchard, you look at all these guys that they played Neemias Queta a couple of days ago. Like, they're all studs, and I didn't even mention Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum. Plus, they just won the finals. Plus, they went to it in 2022, so they know what it's like to lose the finals, and they know what it's like to win it. And as we've seen in the past, like it takes you time to not just get to the finals, but to win the finals. And this Celtics team has been there. They've done that. If they're playing the Thunder in a series, I'm picking the Celtics 10 times out of 10. So I still think Boston's the best team in the league, even with the loss to the Warriors and another loss on the resume as well, too. This team is ridiculous.
They understand
And
the
I'm not
secret.
trying to glaze.
It's the secret to basketball is you need to have superstars that are unselfish. They could have easily traded Jaylen Brown for 100 picks, but what is Zachary Ricochet going to do for the Celtics team? They understood sometimes you just got to keep building around your guys, and they did it.
Yeah. And not even to mention, I do want to pull up his stats because I just kind of was thinking about this now. Jason Tatum is playing like an MVP candidate. He's averaging over 30 a game, 7.6 rebounds and 5 assists. Like, he's probably on pace to win an MVP this year. And that's not something that I think many people had in the fold for the Celtics team, just how good he was going to be this year. On to the second half, though, and it's all college football.
Yeah, we'll kick off college football with something I've been kind of avoiding just because it's been so close, but it's time to talk about the Heisman Watch again. We'll start off from the bottom. The honorable mentions, Jalen Milroe and Bryson Daly have done a lot with their legs recently. They still both have playoff aspirations. I just feel like the voters are going to go in a different direction, again, based on the voting history, but great seasons for Bama and Army, of course. We'll start off number 5, a new face. It's Curtis Rourke, the Indiana quarterback. He's going to get the nod for me because they're now 10-0 after beating Michigan. Rourke has the second best QBR in the nation, a 21-4 touchdown interception ratio, and it's given him an opportunity to not only be a college star, but an NFL draft pick too, after being a no-star recruit for the Ohio Bobcats. So awesome story for him. I love giving those guys the nod when it's a close race between him and a Milroe. So sorry, Milroe and Daly. Number 4.
Milroe did play ridiculous, though. I will say that.
That was. I want to say it was 180 rushing and 4 touchdowns on the ground. So this thing isn't over. That's for sure. Definitely one of the weirder races here. Here's another older fellow, Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback of Oregon. He reminds me a lot of Kellen Moore, because you can tell he's not going to be a first-round pick no matter what he does. He's been dominating college football, though. Another efficient 3-touchdown game against Maryland. And the main reason he's up here is because Oregon is number 1, and this guy's completing 75% of his passes. That's a ridiculous number. Another quarterback doing similar stuff is going to be Cam Ward at the 3 spot. They lost to Georgia Tech, but he's been consistently putting up 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not as many turnovers as past years. And they still have a shot at the playoffs, thanks to Clemson choking, and mostly thanks to him going to Miami. Here we go. Here's the top 2. Right now, I do have Travis Hunter at the 2 spot. It was another 9-catch, 99-yard, 1-touchdown game. Big win over Texas Tech. And, of course, he plays defense, too. They're going to host an angry Utah team on Saturday. So it's a chance for him to either have a trap game or solidify a spot in the top 2. Because, of course, my number 1 guy is going to be Ashton Jeanty, Boise State running back, 209 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns over Nevada. They're going to be at San Jose State on Saturday. They're a little better than Nevada, but I would expect a similar stat line. If they keep winning and he keeps putting up 200 yards, then he's going to be in the top 2 when we get to New York at the end of the season. All right. Got any notes for me?
No, I'm pretty much cool with that. I do want to say something about Dylan Gabriel, though, that I've kind of just observed and thought about with over this past week or so. And I was kind of on the same page as you, where he's just not going to be, a top-tier prospect guy once it gets to the NFL. But I was kind of thought that same way about Bo Nix last year. And I know this year, this episode specifically, I've talked a lot about how Bo Nix has changed his perspective, or I've changed my perspective on Bo Nix over the past few weeks. But for Dylan Gabriel and that offense that they run in Oregon, I think it being such like modern day pro style offense that helps Dylan Gabriel in his draft stock. And I think the ability to run and stuff that we've seen with Dylan Gabriel this year has been pretty indicative of him as a playmaker. And so I wouldn't be shocked. I don't think he's a first round pick, and I would hate it for the Raiders to take him at 5 or some dumb shit like that. But I wouldn't be shocked if he sneaks up draft boards and becomes a second round pick or something like that, which is not something that we would have thought of when he was at Oklahoma. Just one of the more experienced guys, and especially now playing in the Big Ten, he's playing against good competition, and maybe that was the biggest knock on Bo Nix before.
Yeah, well, 100% agree with you. I mean, think about today's game, right? Even a 4th-round pick is going to get a shot at some point compared to just being a guy who is floating around the XFL. Maybe 1 or 2 of those guys get a preseason shot. So I agree. He's going to get drafted, and someone's going to take a shot on him.
Yeah.
All right. We got the Week 12 preview. Another pretty good week of college football, even though it didn't look like it was going to be last season. That's just how these things go. We had a bunch of crazy games at that 12:30 slot, like we projected. We'll start it off 9 a.m. We kick off Week 12 with a double-ranked ACC matchup. That's Clemson at Pitt. This game's important because the loser of this game will be eliminated thanks to the rise of SMU in the ACC. Also in the morning, Colorado hosts Utah. Like I just mentioned, Shedeur Sanders and Travis have been pretty unstoppable this year. At 12:30, we have a couple of upset watch games. A fun Boston College team will go to 8-1 SMU and try to ruin their season. Billy O, having those guys pretty locked in. Thomas Castellanos just got benched, though, so we'll see what happens with them. And also, at the same time, LSU will play at Florida. Hopefully, DJ Lagway is cleared to play, because if he does, this could be a pretty good shootout. At 4/4:30, we have 7-2 Arizona State at 7-2 Kansas State. That's for second place in the Big 12. Future matchup against BYU, very important for Hoosier 12 coming up here next for us. And then, of course, the game of the week should probably be Tennessee at Georgia. If Georgia has any fire left in the tank, they should demolish these guys. But Carson Beck and the rest of the offense did look awful against Ole Miss. Also, we got to mention them. They're number 1 in the nation. Oregon will go to Wisconsin. It's a Rose Bowl rematch. It's all different guys, of course, but maybe if the emotions are still there, this could be a closer game than we realize. And then for the West Coasters, 7 o'clock, BYU gets it again. This time it's against 3-6 Kansas, but Kansas got their 3 best players back from injury. That's their quarterback, Jalen Daniels, running back, Devin Neal, and corner, Kobe Bryant. They scored 45 on Iowa State in the upset last week. That is the preview.
Crazy. There's multiple defensive back Kobe Bryants now.
Yeah.
And they don't even spell the name the same.
No,
just crazy.
They're all different.
Moving on, though, to Hoosier 12, is an installment that we've had a couple times on our show now, and it's definitely something that's grown on us as the weeks go on, and the craziness of college football continues. We'll start off with our first 4, which is the 4 conference winners in the Big 10, the Big 12, the ACC, and the SEC. So, Skyler, who are your top 4 teams and what are their seeds?
We'll start off with Oregon at the number 1 spot. Seems like they just need to beat the winner of Ohio State and Indiana. That game will be next week. Pretty good game. But I trust Oregon to get at least to the playoff at the top here. Number 2, shit, man, we got like 8 teams tied for the SEC lead, but I'm going to stick with Texas. They have what seems to be the best quarterback play, no matter if it's their number 1, Quinn Ewers, number 2, Arch Manning. Some interesting DMs came out from Quinn Ewers, but we don't need to get into all of that. At number 3, I'm going to shake things up and go with SMU. Miami lost. We knew it was definitely possible, but SMU's got all the momentum in the world. Their only loss, BYU. And number 4 with the Big 12, you know it. I've been openly rooting against BYU, so I'm going to go ahead and pick Colorado to win the Big 12. I really like what I've seen so far. It's such a much better team than last season, and they definitely have the firepower to score 40 in a potential Dr. Pepper Big 12 championship game.
Yeah. My Hoosier 12, I'll start it off with Oregon. No surprises there. That's something that we've seen. Undefeated in the Big Ten means a ton. And there's another undefeated team in the Big Ten that we'll talk about here shortly. Number 2 for me is going to be Texas. Like you said, the SEC is crazy, whether it's Texas, Tennessee, Bama, or Georgia, or even Ole Miss. There's a chance for all of them. I think Texas is leading the way right now, though. Number 3 for me, they were number 4 before. I bump them up one spot. I put BYU here. Undefeated. I think if they go undefeated through the regular season, win the Big 12 championship, they deserve the number 3 spot over whoever wins the ACC. And then number 4, I do have Miami here. I know the loss to Georgia Tech sucks. I think they still win the conference. I know SMU, like you said, is on a roll. They have a very impressive resume where their only loss is to an undefeated team. But I just think Miami's slightly bit better, and they would win not the championship, or I guess it is the ACC championship game there. But on to the next 7 teams, not the 8 team. We'll get into the group of 5 after that. But your 5 through 11, pretty much all the stragglers in the big conferences.
Yeah, the wild cards, if you will, here. We'll start off with Ohio State. I'm sure that it definitely comes down to that Indiana game, but if they win that game, they will be in the top 7. Most likely. That seems like their floor so far. Georgia at number 6. They just had a really embarrassing loss, but I hinted at it earlier. I think they're going to demolish Tennessee. And if they don't belong here. But we just got to wait and see for them because it's an incredible team, just like in the years past. At number 7, I do have Alabama. It's another situation where they don't have a tough conference schedule to finish here. At Oklahoma, that's not the same squad that we thought they were. And hosting Auburn, they're 3-6. So I think what would that be? 10-2 Alabama team would get in. Notre Dame, we kind of thought they were a little screwed after losing to UNI earlier this season. But again, they've handled business. If they beat Army, they are in. They don't have a conference game. I'm realizing I put Georgia twice. I think that is actually Miami. So yeah, Miami loses in the championship game. They would drop down to the 9th spot. I'm sorry about that. Number 10, I do have Indiana. I gave them the big resume speech 2 weeks ago. I think even if they do have one loss, they're going to be okay. They should make it because of the circumstances. They're in the Big Ten Conference. That's the second best conference in the nation. Number 11, it's Penn State. It's another one of those situations. I'm sure the committee is going to try real hard to get Ole Miss or Tennessee in there, but Penn State is going to be 11-1. That's just how it goes. And number 12, it's my Boise State Broncos. I've tried to figure out different scenarios to get them up to the 4 spot, but most likely they're going to end up down here. They just got to keep winning.
All right, this is where it gets interesting. Number 5 spot, I do have Ohio State here, followed by number 6, Indiana. These can be interchangeable as of right now. Obviously, we'll figure out which team is actually better in about a week and a half. But as of right now, these 2 teams definitely deserve to be in the upper half of this, 5 through 11 seeding. 7 through 10, I have the jumble fuck of what is the SEC right now. So I have Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and Ole Miss here. If Tennessee loses and Georgia wins, that's when we get into a ridiculous state where all these teams are likely going to be 2-loss teams going into championship weekend. And most of these teams aren't going to be playing in the SEC championship. So obviously the winner makes it. They get their bye. I think the loser, even with their 3 loss, probably still gets in because it is against, that extra game. I definitely see a scenario, though, where all 4 of these teams make it, especially because I don't think Georgia is going to lose to Massachusetts or Georgia Tech in the coming weeks. I don't think Bama is going to lose to Mercer, Oklahoma, or Auburn in the coming weeks. I don't think Ole Miss is going to lose to Florida or Mississippi State, and I don't think Tennessee is going to lose to UTEP or Vanderbilt. But just because I think something doesn't mean it's going to happen. I would almost guarantee you that one of these teams is going to lose one of those games that they need to have to get in. But that's because what college football is, and that's amazing. Last team I have, though, number 11, is going to be Penn State. Again, you just kind of have to throw them in there if they have a one-loss season. I think it's definitely deserving of a college football playoff spot, but I think a lot of people will be like, oh, I kind of want to see SMU in there or Notre Dame or something like that. And Penn State's having too good of a season to not put them in, even though they're probably – or they like pretty much 100% won't be in the Big Ten championship game. We've talked about this before where it's like they're ahead of Indiana right now, but if Indiana beats Ohio State, then they jump them, and Indiana plays Oregon in the final, and if Ohio State wins, they already lost to Penn State, or Penn State already lost to Ohio State, so they're not going to be in that game anyways, and I think that kind of moved them down to outside of that top 8 or 9 seed, so they get the 11 for me. And the number 12 team, same thing I've had for the entire season now at this point, is going to be Army. Obviously, they have a game where everything hinges on in the game against Notre Dame in not this weekend, but next weekend, because they're going to need that to win and or to get in. And if they get that win, then they're going to get in. So, in my opinion, we'll see how the committee decides.
Yeah.
Moving on there from Hoosier 12, though, we'll get back into that in a couple weeks, maybe even next week with how crazy college football is if we get a big loss or something like that. Our layups bowl predictions last week were not too good. We won 1 out of 4, but didn't come down terribly bad. Both our layups did miss. I had Atlanta -3.5 versus New Orleans. New Orleans had that interim coach craziness that happens every single time. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but they lose there. So that's obviously red. Skyler had Detroit -3.5. At Houston, they win by 3. So unfortunately, that doesn't happen. This week, I'm taking Detroit -13. I know that's a massive spread for the NFL versus Jacksonville. But what we've seen with Detroit is that they don't play down to their opponents ever. I think Goff has a big bounce back game. I wouldn't be shocked if they beat Jacksonville by like 40 or something like that. Especially with Trevor Lawrence likely hurt.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you, especially if Mac Jones is playing in that one. For my layup, I'm going to be going back to my roots, a college football pick. How about Washington State? They're currently revealing the rankings right now. It's not official, and I didn't see Washington State yet, but they were like 21st. John Mateer is a great air raid quarterback for the West Coast. They should be able to beat New Mexico by 13 points.
Under our bold predictions last week, the only pick we got right was Pittsburgh money line versus Washington as a +125 when we took it. Skyler had Vandy +140 versus South Carolina, or Scarolina, as some say. That did not hit, unfortunately. This week, I have the Cincinnati Bengals money line versus the Chargers on Sunday Night Football. That is like Sunday Night Football, but in LA. Should be a good game, but I do think Cincinnati's offense is going to be enough to win this one.
For my bold prediction, Kyle, it is rare to see a team like the Kansas City Chiefs not be the favorite, so I did end up choosing this one. It's Kansas City +115 at Buffalo. It's not that I'm a Buffalo hater necessarily, even though I'm wearing Jet stuff right now. It would be understandable. I just can't really bet against Patrick Mahomes. The football gods are completely in his favor right now, and I definitely debated Atlanta also +115, but that game's going to be madness. 115 for Kansas City is okay with me.
Yeah, should be a fun one. I wish that game was on Sunday Night Football or something like that. I believe that's just the game of the week or something like that. Tony
it's
Romo
because they put Jets Colts on there originally. They had to flex us out.
Man. Anyways, that's going to do it though for episode 218. Jeez, I'm just rolling over my words today. But we'll see you guys next week for 219. Power rankings next week as well too. That'll be fun. Hopefully some more crazy college football.
Let's have a great NBA Cup tonight, Kyle.
Yeah, go Dubs.
Go Dubs.
Welcome back, Clay.